I feel like there are a lot of transition questions on this particular test that are really just about playing the game of the SAT. And I think this is the one where it really just like goes through the roof here. This is all about playing the game. I don't think most people are going to get this right just by pure knowledge of the situation. So what's the game? Well, we're going to use dumb summaries, right? We're going to try to understand what's going on in the simplest way possible so that when we're doing this, we're not thinking about what is the right grammar or what sounds good, right? Because I don't think any of us would use any of these answer choices in our own writing. So sounding good is not going to be a useful metric here. Remember, if a question is testing the transitions, it's the one rare case where it's testing the ideas without giving you a literal question that tells you that. So we need to think about the ideas. We need to use dumb summaries to capture those ideas in the simplest way possible. So we read the sentence before and the sentence after, and they're long. They're long sentences, but focus on repeated ideas, right? Members assert that food should be flavorful, carrying the properties of a particular region. It should be raised using environmentally sustainable practices that preserve biodiversity, and it should be accessible to all without exploiting the labors of those who produced it. Now, what do I pick out of that sentence? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of information, but I follow my own advice. Main ideas are repeated ideas. What's repeated? Should, should, should. They use the word should 3 times. This is a sentence about what should be done. Okay? So that's my dumb summary. It's not about biodiversity. It's not about food. It's not about wherever the food is produced. I couldn't care less. This is a sentence that their main point is something should happen. Okay? I don't care about the specifics. It's a should sentence. Now let's look at the next one. I'm going to skip what's written there. Slow Food runs programs that support small-scale producers in marketing regional foods in a world where food corporations threaten to drive them out of the marketplace and homogenize food choices. So they run programs. So this is what they should do, and this is what they do. Haha. So what transition does that? Honestly, I don't really know. But here's the thing, is I do know what some of these transitions mean. I can summarize the transition words in the same way that I summarize the passage, right? These are long words and phrases that normally I don't use, but I do use similar phrases and words in my own writing that are much simpler, and I want to condense these ones down to those simpler phrases. In my study guide, I have a page with a bunch of boxes that put a lot of these words in the right place. And one of them, the most recognizable one, is be, which is just a fancy way of saying but. It's a contrast word, and so we would be looking for a contrast. Is there a contrast here? Not really. If anything, I might say that both of these are positive, right? They're talking about positive things, about how to make good food and what they're doing to make good food and blah, blah, blah. So I don't see any sort of negative in here. This seems to be a continuation of an idea, not a contrast, not a switch. So that's maybe the easiest thing to eliminate. What about these other ones? Well, let's take them literally. In short, choice A. What does that mean? Well, we know what the word short means. So what does in short mean? It means that the thing we're about to say is a short version of what we just said. Is the second sentence shorter than the first? No. It's not a summary of what we just said. It's a new idea. It's not a shorter version of the first sentence. It's a completely new sentence. So again, taking that literally, even though we might never use that phrase ourselves, we know what the word short means. This is not a shorter version. C is weird. D is weird. But again, we've got some familiar words. Same token. By the same token. That sounds something like my grandparents would say. Well, same means I'm probably saying the same thing. Is the second sentence the same thing as the first sentence? Is it making some sort of comparison? Not really. It's building off of the first idea. There is clearly some sort of connection between them, but it's not like a repetition. It's kind of the same reason that A is wrong, right? It's not saying the exact same thing, or it's not giving us another similar situation. It's just kind of a new thought. And that leaves us with this one that we would probably never pick if we were just straight up asked to fill in a blank. But because it's a multiple choice test, we can use the gamesmanship of the SAT to our advantage here and work through the choices and try to come up with the right answer that maybe isn't obvious, but maybe all the other ones are wrong, and that's okay. Now, I still want to explain why this is correct, because it's definitely right, and now I know what this means. I know that it's right. It fits perfectly with what's going on. So I'm going to use a familiar phrase that you hopefully have heard. The ends justify the means. Hopefully you've heard that. What does it mean? It's a phrase that we use to suggest that someone's purpose, their goal, is good, so the means, the ways that they go about achieving that goal are therefore also good. It's usually a way to justify bad behavior. Right, we say the ends justify the means. That means that, okay, because I have a good goal, I'm allowed to do and get away with some bad things. So basically, both of the words here, ends and means, are taking on a definition that's a little different from what we're used to. In this case, means is like methods, and ends is like goals. So the goals that we are pursuing justify the methods that we use to achieve those goals. That's the meaning of that phrase. And the word ends here has that same meaning. This is basically kind of saying the same thing. To these goals is a perfect fit here, right? Because the first sentence is what they should do. This is what our goals are. And then to achieve these goals, to these ends, this is what slow food is doing. This is their method. It makes total sense. I get that it only makes sense in hindsight for many of you. That's okay. The way you can get this is not necessarily by knowing what to these ends means. It's by knowing what all the other stuff means and trusting the process. However, it would be beneficial to you to memorize what that actual phrase means. I think it's something that comes up once in a while in the SAT. It's not usually right, but it's an answer choice. It would just be much more helpful to understand. And I think the fact that it uses the word ends, a word that we are familiar with in lots of other contexts, but it's got a different meaning than we're used to. But there are other places in English where we use the word ends to mean goals. And, right, your end point, where you want to end up. And so that's common enough on both the reading and the writing sections that you really want to be comfortable with that phrasing. So they should do these things, and to these ends, they are doing this to achieve those goals. That's what we're saying. It fits perfectly. But this is tough. This is a great example of, the more you practice, the better you'll get at using the game to get these questions right. Transition questions in particular are a great avenue to pick up points because they're hard, but the SAT follows certain rules, and if you learn those rules, you can get those hard points right.